Hello, everyone. And now you will hear a brief summary of the movie Powder. Enjoy. A pregnant woman was brought to the hospital after being struck by lightning. Unfortunately, they could only save the baby, and he was born an albino. But the father asked to see the newborn, who was placed in an incubator. But the device measuring brain waves showed unusually high activity. "This is not my son," the man said and started crying. Some time passed. The strange child was raised by his grandparents, but they passed away. It turned out that the albino boy was kept in the basement by his relatives. Sheriff Barnum invited child psychologist Jesse Caldwell to come and assess the situation. The neighbors say that the boy is mentally challenged and just abnormal. But perhaps the old folks hid him from everyone for a reason. The sheriff and the psychologist went down to the basement. The boy sat in the darkness and calmly stated that his name was Powder. Finally, the boy emerged. Jeremy Reed, that's Powder's real name. The sheriff couldn't take his eyes off this extraordinary person. Jeremy explains that he can be outside until the sun gets too high. He has a painful sensitivity to light. Sometimes, even dark glasses don't help. Powder never went to school, although he loves to read. He has a phenomenal memory. The guy asked Jesse to name any page in a book and then accurately recited what was written there purely from memory. He knows by heart all the books in his sizable library. Powder, wearing dark glasses and his late grandfather's suit, left the basement. As he passed by the police cars, suddenly the sirens turned on. Only now did the sheriff notice that the roof of the house was covered in lightning rods. And his assistant mentioned that the body of the deceased grandfather was saturated with electricity, as if he had undergone defibrillation. Jesse brought Powder to the small town of Vinton. She works at a boys' boarding school and plans to leave him there. The unusual young man immediately caught the attention of the boys playing football. Jessie tells her colleague that Jeremy behaves like an innocent child who knows nothing about this world. Jeremy eats separately from the others in the cafeteria. Of course, he couldn't escape the attention of the local bullies. They approached him and asked why he looks like a vampire. Jeremy tried to ignore their leader, John, but he took away his food and declared that all newcomers must pass a test. They have to balance a spoon on the tip of their nose or in their behind. Powder took the spoon, rubbed it, and left it standing on the table. All the other cutlery immediately magnetized to it, and everyone in the cafeteria froze in place. Then another spoon appeared and, dancing and leaping, joined the others, destroying the entire construction. Powder smiled, but John looked at him with an unfriendly glance. The sheriff has a difficult relationship with his son, and his wife Emma is seriously ill and suffers from severe pain. The whole town is already gossiping about the extraordinary guy. The caregiver also shared her opinion. The doctor examined Jeremy and declared him perfectly healthy. Soon, they will bring him special lenses to protect his eyes from bright light. Jesse suggested that he attend the local school, and he agreed. By the first day of school, Jeremy received his lenses. As he stepped off the bus, he immediately drew astonished looks from all the students on the schoolyard. Physics is taught by the eccentric teacher, Donald Tripley. He brought out a device called Jacob's Ladder designed to demonstrate electric current. And the electrical arcs, occurring one after another, make Powder uncomfortable. He trembles uncontrollably, and metal objects around him jump and deform. Unexpectedly, the electricity starts to pass through Jeremy and then back again. He was lifted into the air and levitated until Donald broke the device. The teacher touched the boy, and an electric current ran through his body. Reporters gathered at the hospital where they placed Jeremy, but the sheriff didn't let them in. Donald is also trying to get into the room. The doctor reported that Jeremy shows no signs of being shocked by the electricity. He feels fine, although there's a huge hole burnt in his sweater. The teacher concluded that Jeremy is an electrical conductor, which is why he doesn't have hair. Meanwhile, unnoticed, Powder escaped from the hospital. He strolled along the street until his classmate Lindsay's dog started barking at him. She is surprised to see him recover so quickly. Lindsay noticed that Jeremy has beautiful eye color, but he immediately took off his lens, which slightly confused the girl. Everyone in the neighborhood stares at Powder. He confesses that he can hear people from the inside, all their thoughts and memories. However, Lindsay didn't take his words seriously. Jeremy decides to walk back to his home, but the sheriff blocks his way. The boy senses that the sheriff's deputy is afraid of him. He says he doesn't want to go back to the boarding school, and he can't stay in the hospital anymore. This place is associated with his worst memory, his birth into this world. A professor from the Ministry of Education came to the boarding school. Jeremy passed an IQ test with a phenomenal result. Interestingly, all his knowledge comes from books. He can't watch television because all the electronics near him go haywire, and he feels unwell. The test showed that Jeremy has the highest level of development in the history of humanity, but he doesn't care about that. The only thing he wants is to return to the farm. He also knows that the professor actually considers him a fraud and came here just to prove it. Jeremy got angry, and all the nearby technology malfunctioned. The students from the boarding school set off on a hike under the supervision of the sheriff and his deputy. Powder didn't want to go. As a storm approached, he felt it in his entire body. His mother died of a lightning strike. He personally remembers how it happened. In the forest, all the lizards from the area came running to Jeremy. He also felt that Mitch and John were approaching him from behind. But the latter had a rifle in his hands, pointing it at Jeremy. But suddenly a shot rang out. The sheriff's deputy shot a deer, and he was very pleased with it. The animal was dying in agony. But Jeremy touched the deer and grabbed the hunter's hand, forcing the killer to feel what his victim was experiencing. But the man fell to the ground and screamed in pain. But Jeremy only let him go when John almost shot him. He passed the pain and suffering through himself to the deputy, to the sheriff and the psychologist. Jeremy says he didn't attack the hunter. He just helped him see and realize what he was doing. He no longer wants to see anyone, not even Jesse, who is pretending to be his friend. With the power of his mind, the boy destroyed the psychologist's office. All he wants is to go back home. The doctor suggests to the sheriff to readmit his wife to the hospital. She is tormenting herself and him. But when Emma could still speak, she asked to be left at home. She is beyond hope, but Barnum cannot bring himself to let her go. Upset, Jeremy sat alone in the cafeteria in the evening when the physicist approached him. Donald is fascinated by his unusual student. Apparently, Jeremy is almost entirely made of energy. It seems that he might not need his body anymore soon. His mind is at a level of development that separates him from humans by millennia. He appears as a messenger from the future. But Donald offered to be his friend and extended his hand to Jeremy. But the boy also decided to demonstrate a trick to his teacher and electrified him. However, his grandparents always feared touching him. But the sheriff's deputy has changed significantly. He removed all the guns from his house and refused to participate in shooting competitions. He even stopped carrying a weapon while on duty. But the man admits that when Jeremy touched his hand, he felt intense fear and pain. He felt as if he was dying along with the deer. Since then, he can no longer hunt. At night, the sheriff came to Jeremy and asked him to come to his house. Barnum wanted to know what his wife Emma thinks and feels. But Jeremy conveyed her thoughts. Emma won't be able to die peacefully until she knows that her husband and son have reconciled. But she believes that Jeremy is an angel who came to take her. But she asked to have her old silver ring put on her finger. But for a brief moment, she even regained consciousness. Meanwhile, the anxious caregiver called the sheriff's son to come here as soon as possible. His father came out to meet him and hugged his son tightly. Finally, Emma could peacefully depart for heaven. But Jeremy went to the town fair. As usual, everyone was staring at him. Powder read the thoughts of the townspeople. They think he simply killed Emma. He tells Lindsay that people believe they live separately from everything else. But each of them is a part of this world. Everything is connected. But Jeremy touched Lindsay and let her feel his heartbeat, read his thoughts, and immerse herself in his memories. Her father believed that Jeremy was ugly and always denied that he was his son. But in Lindsay's opinion, he has the most beautiful face in the world. She kissed Jeremy, but their moment was interrupted by her father, who attacked him. Jesse intervened before the man could harm Jeremy further. Powder felt like the loneliest person in the world. He no longer intends to stay at the boarding school, so he packed his belongings and was about to go to the farm. But he decided to go to the gym and take one last look at the most ordinary guys. There, he got fixated on Ski's soulfulness, his mane, and hairy armpits. Jeremy's words triggered memories of John's abusive stepfather, who used to beat him throughout his childhood, leading to his bitterness and anger. Enraged, John cornered Powder against a wall. The thunder rumbled in the background, and seeing Jeremy's fear, John and his friends dragged him out onto the street. But the only person trying to defend Powder was Mitch, but John was relentless. John and his friends stripped Jeremy naked, mocking his albinism, and planned to paint him as a joke. After laughing at him, John kicked Jeremy into a dirty puddle. They lifted him back up and brought him closer to John. But just as they were about to hurt him again, lightning struck directly above them. The powder started attracting all the metallic objects on John and his friends. But suddenly, Jeremy seemed to explode with energy, scattering everyone around. While John's heart stopped, Powder managed to restart it with electric shocks. Jeremy approached John and applied electrical charges to his chest to revive him. He succeeded, and Mitch promised to help him escape from the boarding school. Jeremy found refuge in a car loaded with haystacks and drove it to the farm. He finally returned home and went down to the basement, where he found everything that once belonged to him gone. Shortly after, Jessie arrived and discovered Jeremy in an empty room. She promised him that if he went with her, they would figure something out. Donald offered to help them, but the conspirators were not fast enough to escape before the police arrived. Jessie asked the sheriff to turn away and give them a chance to escape. The thunder rumbled again, and the sheriff took his partner aside and ordered him to leave. But for some reason, Jeremy didn't get into Jessie's car. He told the sheriff that his wife hadn't gone anywhere. She was everywhere. The powder ran into the field, arms outstretched, and lightning struck him directly. As he ran, he absorbed energy until he dissolved into a bright flash of light. A powerful pulse passed through the people present. The powder became part of everything, pure energy, no longer needing a human vessel. If you enjoyed my retelling, please support the channel with a comment of more than 4 words. It greatly helps promote the video. Goodbye.